This podcast is part of the Shareable Podcast Network. Learn more at shareable.fm. Hello, friend. I'm Jeff Gibbard, and this is my podcast, Shareable. I decided to call it Shareable because the conversations I have with my guests are so good, you got to tell someone about it. Shareable is a variety show of sorts where we talk about culture, relationships, leadership, dating, business, comics, marketing, art, sales, and more. Wherever the conversation takes us, one thing is for sure. This podcast is shareable. Hey everybody, it's Jeff. Just a real quick housekeeping before we get started. I record all of my episodes over Zoom unless I get to have somebody in the studio with me live, but that gives me the opportunity to talk to people all over the world and really bring the best guests onto the show. So today I talk with Jantsch. He's amazing, but I wanted to give you just the heads up that you will notice a little bit of a digitizing effect. It happens sporadically throughout the episode, but it is not consistent throughout the whole episode. So if you notice a little bit in the beginning, it does subside shortly into the episode. But I wanted to give you the heads up just so that you knew that it was coming and it's there, and I hope that you enjoy this episode. Welcome back to Shareable. Today, my guest is Jantsch. I've been hoping to have you on the podcast, I've had several of them, but on a podcast for years, and it just never came about. I never reached out to you. I didn't take the initiative. And then we got connected through one of my former guests, Lindsay Peterson, who is totally awesome. And here we are having this conversation. So, John, welcome to the show, man.
Well, thanks for finally getting around to asking me.
Right. If I had read one of the pages from your new book, The Self-Reliant Entrepreneur, I probably would have taken the initiative because there's a lot of kicks in the ass in that book. So, John, you're the author of 6 books, including the most recent, which is The Self-Reliant Entrepreneur. And I know you're kind of doing the podcast circuit and talking to different people and getting the word out there about your book. I'm going to just wholeheartedly endorse the book right now at the start of the show for those who are looking for a really great kind of daily meditation book especially for the entrepreneur, obviously. This is a book you definitely want to pick up. So before we get to the book, though, I want to take a little bit of time to kind of get to know you a little bit better because we've been connected for like a decade on social, and our interactions have probably been like tweets passing by each other directly to each other, but that's about it. So I want to talk a little bit about like your background, and especially for those who don't know you at all, from my audience, I'd like them to at least know who you are. So you've been an entrepreneur for 30 years now, correct? 30 plus.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I was. I think my job opportunities felt limited 30 some years ago, and so I thought, I'll start my own business. But it really is fun over the last couple of decades to see how now so many people want that. I mean, that's what they want to do. It's gotten easier. It's certainly gotten culturally more acceptable, to just, maybe have a couple side gigs and, just living your life that way. But yeah, when I did it, I don't think I called myself an entrepreneur. I just thought I could hustle work and make ends meet. That was really kind of how I looked at it. But yeah, now 30 years later, I guess it's been quite a journey.
So can you give me like the kind of 60-second version of, I know Duct Tape Marketing was like really like a big break and pivot, but was there anything that kind of came before that was like the struggle and then that was the win? Or did you just kind of come out of the gate and like knock it out of the park with the book that turned into this thing?
Well, I'd actually owned my own business for about 10 years before Duct Tape Marketing existed. I had the clever, innovative name of Jantsch Communications as my business when I first started. And as I said, I jokingly say I hustled work, but that's really what I did. I just did big projects, little projects. Anybody who said, well, can you do this? I said, sure. How hard could that be? And I really, I went that way for a while. And is this one of those shows where you get to reveal your deep secrets?
Yeah, this is, some people call this like the entrepreneurial therapist couch. Like, I ask people about their parents and their divorces and like everything. But like we can go deep into it, man.
So I found that I started working with small business owners too, because again, that was just one of the people that said, can you help us? And I really found that I enjoyed working with small business owners more than anything else, but they were really hard. Didn't have any budget or, even attention spans. The way that I had seen, marketing done in kind of the agency way. I had actually worked for an ad agency for about 5 years before I actually went on my own. That was really the only job I had. And And so I learned a way to work with small business owners, and and I continued to hustle work. And so the deep, it's not really that deep dark secret, but because I do tell people this, but I got a knock on my door one day from the FBI and a subpoena to testify before a grand jury. They were investigating one of my clients for what ended up being felony racketeering charges. And so they were just talking to everybody that showed up on the books, right? And so fortunately, I had very little of interest to share with them, but it was a real wake up for me and the wake up was just that, in my heart of hearts, I knew they were doing some fishy stuff, but hey, they paid my bill. And it was kind of a moment when I said, you know what, I'm how did I get there? I'm not doing that anymore. I'm going to work with exactly who I want, exactly how I want, people that I trust, people that I respect, people that I can actually bring value and who love what I do. And that was really the genesis of duct tape marketing, or at least this kind of idea that I'm going to scrap everything down to just working with, I'm going to figure out how to work with small business owners because I love working with them. And so the approach that I landed on from that really was this idea of, and where I could walk in and say, here's what I'm going to do. Here's what you're going to do. Here's the results we hope to get. And here's what it costs. And that to me felt like a way for me to kind of solve my, frustration of working with small business owners. And what I quickly found out is I actually tapped into what is still today one of the greatest frustrations. In fact, increasingly a frustration with small businesses. It's really hard to buy marketing services. And as I said, it's gotten worse because everybody's selling a piece of the puzzle. So the fact that somebody was going to come in and say, we're going to start with strategy, we're going to install a system, and you're going to know what it costs, was kind of music to their ears. And that was really the turning point, for me in figuring out, saying, yeah, okay, this is how I'm going to attack this. And you mentioned my first book, Duct Tape Marketing, was really just kind of a recounting of me. I had actually been selling a course online and working with small business owners under this idea of duct tape marketing, and really just kind of became the compilation of the work I had been doing. I just laid out in duct tape marketing, and that's kind of I believe, at least, why that book has been successful is that, that there was nobody else talking about marketing in that way for the small business, at least. And I started to actually attract other agencies and independent marketing consultants around the world who then now license. In fact, I've got about 150 of those folks that use our system, work with, at any given month, 1,000 to 2,000 small business owners, installing, as we say, the duct tape marketing system.
That is really cool. I actually just started a business called the Superhero Institute that is looking to work with freelancers, entrepreneurs, and small businesses. And nice. One of the things that in my kind of previous work in my agency, I had my own agency for 7 years, and then I went to another agency for 1.5 years. So it was very difficult to work with small businesses. So I don't know why when I came out of this, I thought I'm going to go back to that well. But it's kind of amazing that you were able to build a business on small businesses, because so often it's difficult. You want to go up market as quickly as possible so you can get those higher margins and charge those higher fees, but somehow you kind of like crack the code there. And I'm not sure if that's, do you think that's something that was kind of like a sign of the times? Like at that time where you started it, it was just that there was a good window of opportunity, and now maybe not as much? Or do you think that there's still, like, if you had to start over right now, would you do the same thing?
Well, the need is definitely there, and probably gotten bigger. One of the things that didn't exist, because again, this was really at the early on part of the digital marketing and the online marketing. And so what was happening was you had this, kind of massive explosion of small business owners going, hey, all we used to do is buy a Yellow Pages ad, now what? And so the opportunity was, there's no question the opportunity was there because there was such flux. The opportunity is still there. I mean, the challenge is there's so many people now going after that part of the market, and some for evil, in my opinion. You got the SEO companies and the software companies and the people that used to sell Yellow Pages ads now going after that market, and unfortunately in a lot of cases just offering kind of low cost but low value things for them. And so we still do a whole lot of fixing and unpacking, stuff that somebody sold to somebody that, that didn't work. And, that's one of the things that really not only drives me, but drives me crazy when I walk in, and I'm not picking on all SEO people, but they seem to be the most guilty when I walk into a small business that's been spending a couple grand a month with an SEO firm, and I literally have to ask them, what have they been doing for you? And so that dynamic is actually, I think, made it harder because there's such a lack of trust now in small business owners, in some cases, rightly so. But the opportunity is they know they need to do what's going on. They know the world's changing. And so in a lot of ways, what they're most in search of is somebody they can trust. And that, I think that opportunity, if you can communicate, you can prove to them that you get results, you can show them the ROI, then, the market's still huge.
It's interesting because I've worked in the social media industry for the last 10 years, and I've been kind of transitioning, not out of it entirely, but just to kind of broaden what I talk about.
Sure.
And the example you just gave is sort of like, it highlights both the success and the failure of the quote unquote, the market, right? So on the one hand, if you suck at what you do, you're not going to be able to bring in the business. On the other hand, and if you're good at it, you're hopefully going to be able to like come in and do that cleanup job. On the other hand, there's no barrier to entry for somebody to come in and pretend that they know what the hell they're talking about. And I will levy the charge that SEOs are quite guilty, but being in the social media industry for the last 10 years, I've never seen such a hodgepodge of charlatans and snake oil salesmen who, have 6 months of experience and like are advising businesses and trying to charge exorbitant fees. So, I guess I would kind of look at, in your experience being an entrepreneur and seeing this particular world, what do you think are some of the things that need to be fixed or adjusted to make it more equitable, to make it so that we can build more trust out there? Like, is there any sort of, I don't know, maybe not regulations, but like sort of like what's broken right now that you think we need to fix?
Well, I think, as you mentioned, anytime there's something new, so social media was new, then, Facebook advertising is new. I mean, websites were new at one time. You're always going to have people that are just, they, like you said, they built one website. So because it's new, a lot of people don't understand it. It's easy to sell that. I don't know if there's anything that you can really do about that. But I always advise consultants and business owners. This is what we've been saying forever: is if somebody's talking to you and they're not talking about strategy before they ever start talking about a solution, then run for the hills. I mean, unless your business is selling a $29 product that you just need to make sure that you spend lots of ad dollars on driving eyeballs to that $29 product. You better be talking. 90% of the businesses out there better be talking about who makes an ideal client, why they make an ideal client, how their business is different from everybody else that says they do what they do. If you're not there, you're just asking to waste money.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I actually used to have in my copy, anytime I was in a new business sort of situation, even on my website copy, that basically like some agencies will just jump right into solutions. We always start with strategy. And if you see someone not talking about strategy, you shouldn't trust that person. So I'm in 100% alignment with you there.
I would say the other element too is a lot of what makes effective marketing today, this has always been true, but it's just gotten harder now, is integration. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I scratch my head when I walk into an organization. They've got a web designer, somebody else is, writing content. They've got an SEO person, they've got a pay-per-click person, they've got a social person, and none of these people are talking to each other. It's like, how does that work? How could that possibly work? The real value in any of these channels in many cases is how you're actually able to leverage, integration and them all working together. And so that's certainly another thing that, so it's why the approach we've taken is we want to be your marketing department. Because, it's very hard. Like, we get asked all the time, can you just come do SEO? Well, if the website structure isn't right, if you don't have any content, how are we going to do any SEO for you? So that's always been our approach, is that marketing is a system, and it works better if you are able to get all the parts working together.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I'm building a talk right now called Confluence, and it's about truly integrated marketing, taking in traditional marketing as well as digital marketing, SEO, paid search, social, paid social, content marketing, all that, and integrating it together. The thing that I found so challenging working in social is that because it was so new, we had to really earn our seat at the table, and we were always at the kids' table. And the SEOs got to finally, but towards the the tail end of the time I've been in digital, they've started to get their seat at the table. But social is still like, oh, you just handle the Facebook ads, but
That's right.
get on the TikTok with the college students. So yeah, it's been frustrating. Well, let me ask you a little bit about just from a strictly business perspective, like, kind of taking aside like the market conditions of building a business, and looking specifically at like the kind of structural building a business. You've been doing this for a long time. I know when I started my first company, all of my companies, there have been certain kind of challenges that I've seen in getting it up and running, whether it's, in Philadelphia, the city tax system is bananas, or like, there's all these different issues when you hire people, whatever. Over the time you've been in business, what are some of the biggest challenges you've seen in growing and scaling this business that are external, not the internal stuff? Because I want to get to those later, and a lot of your book really talks a lot more about like kind of what's on the inside. So I want to ask first about like what's on the outside that was challenging for you over the time that you've been building stuff.
Well, I think probably the thing that's always been the hardest for me, and maybe it's just it taps into kind of a blind spot for me, but even though it's gotten so easy to outsource things to folks, to get inexpensive resources in other parts of the world, to do everything sort of virtually, I still think there is a huge place for people in an organization that are excited about what the mission of the organization is. But everything else has gone down in cost except people. And so, a lot of organizations still really struggle with that idea of, while we can outsource all this, is that the right decision? And so, in the interviews I've done, in the working with organizations, people, managing people, finding good people, investing in people is probably the biggest challenge, and it's sort of ironic because, we're in this world where you can actually run a business without talking to anyone, ever.
Yeah.
And, but I still think that a lot of why we do this stuff is to have impact on people. And I think that impact, happens as an organization grows, happens because the people that are attracted to that organization are also there to serve or deliver that same value that the organization stands for.
Got it. So how'd you make it 30 years even doing this? Because entrepreneurialism sucks, man. Like, it's awesome, but it sucks. Like we can all kind of agree. I think every entrepreneur has their like, maybe like Wednesday fantasy of like going and getting the 9 to 5. Maybe it's not an every Wednesday, but you have those days.
Yeah.
And like, I know that I've been doing this maybe 10 years overall, running my own thing, doing my own thing. And it's a challenge, man. And maybe it's just, where I'm at in the world and friends with other entrepreneurs. And it seems like everybody I know, it's just a struggle. You wouldn't do anything else. You wouldn't seriously consider anything else, but it's a struggle. You've made it more than 30 years in doing this. What's the secret to making it that long and not losing your mind? Because you seem like you're well put together. You've written 6 books. Like, you're easy to talk to. Like, how'd you not go crazy?
This is a really simple answer, but I love what I do. I mean, I'm still very excited about it. I have an insatiable curiosity, and that really drives me to explore new things. And I actually get bored if everything's running perfectly. And so, I think that is, as cliche as it kind of sounds, I mean, that's what keeps me going, and what's kept me, in this for so long, is that I truly love what I'm doing, and I truly love the people that I work with.
Have you ever had any like moments, not moments of doubt, but like, so working in social media, and from my perspective of it, I got to a point where I got kind of sour on it, right? It wasn't what I thought it was going to be. Yeah. Everyone's all polarized. All of a sudden, it's just run by brands, and all the humanity seems to have seeped out of it. And I'm just like, what did I choose to put my chips on? Yeah. You've been in marketing for 30 years, and there's all these different aspects of marketing you've been involved in, and you've had to obviously be very flexible over the time. But I mean, have there been points where you've been like, what the hell am I doing?
I wouldn't say that. And again, I think that probably what's held my business together is I'm very agnostic about the tools, about the things that came along. My point of view is that marketing is a system. And if you install a system, that serves an ideal client, everything's going to be okay. And so a lot of times when I would look at, say, Twitter, when Twitter first came along, and a lot of people's initial reaction was, well, how stupid is that? It's like this river of sewage floating by me every day. Why do I want to get in that? What I chose to do is look at that tool and say, okay, you have existing clients. How could this be a tool to help you serve those existing clients better? And just go right down the list. If I'm trying to help somebody decide, is this a place I should be, or is this a tactic I should do? That's to me the big filter. And when people, I think, got in trouble is they looked at that and said, oh, not only is this the new thing, it's the thing. And so, they kind of jumped on it as though it was like this thing outside of what the objective of the business was, which was to get and keep a customer. And that's, that's where a lot of, and there were a lot of people, we all know businesses and, influencers that, basically took advantage of the fact that Twitter didn't have a user guide when it first came out, and built, their entire brand and their entire business around that, and quickly found that was, kind of built on sand. My business, for right or wrong, has been built on a point of view. And I think that's been what has given sort of the staying power of the Duct Tape Marketing brand.
So, having that kind of like guiding ideal, I think is it's obvious that's a it's like a superpower almost. Like it's a driving force to get you there. But I know you've written about and talked about, and some of your posts or some of the pages inside the new book, Self-Reliant Entrepreneur, you talk a little bit about those moments of kind of like conflict where you're out of sync with what your values are, or out of sync with it. You're on clients you shouldn't be with. And you mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast where like you had like kind of the gut feeling. Would you say that over the time you've been an entrepreneur, your gut has gotten better, or that you're better at listening to, or better recognizing when you should listen to it? Or has it kind of just stayed the same? And because I think even on my first day as an entrepreneur, I knew when I had that client that I was like, I shouldn't take this guy. And then I did, and then it worked out terrible. But I had that same gut feeling, and I had it 8 years later, and I was like, I should not take this client on. And I did, and it was terrible. Did your gut get any better? Is there any hope for us?
I think it probably does get better if you're paying attention. That's certainly one of the things that I've experienced. I'm a lot more patient than I used to be, because I do see that, like, if something happens that I frame as like, oh, that wasn't the way I wanted to go, or, that was bad, or that was a failure, over the course of 30 years of doing this, I have experienced repeatedly that something better showed up because of it. It's like, that wasn't supposed to happen, and when you're chasing a check, it's like, it's hard to feel that way. But I think through the sort of lens of hindsight, a lot of times when something happens, or, something doesn't go the way I wanted or I thought it was going to go, I actually kind of look then for like, okay, what was supposed to happen, because it's going to show up. And we can get into all like how the universe works, but I think that's a component of the universe that if you let go and stop trying to control the things you have no control over, which is 90% of life, the ride is a little smoother.
That like so resonates with me in like the most painful way, because after every one of these kind of like shit storms, like the most beautiful thing happens afterwards. You have to go through all of that horribleness. And like, I'm not like super woo woo about it, but at the same time, I do have to kind of question like, well, crap, like if the good came right after all of that, maybe that should have happened, or maybe I should just keep my eyes open more. It's kind of an interesting thing that happens for us. Do you think that there's any rule that all entrepreneurs should follow? Is there like a kind of a set of guiding principles that you think are kind of universal in the world of entrepreneurialism? You said serve the customer, and I kind of feel like that's a good one, right? Like kind of have your eye towards providing value for that audience. Is that one of them? Are there any things that you think are kind of?
Well, I think everybody's different. I mean, I will tell you that, to make this thing, joyful and happy like it should be. I know that I've always been drawn to not only serving folks, but serving folks who love what I do. So there's kind of this mutual, we need each other and we're helping each other, and we're both delivering value. That to me is something, but I also, again, I'm just going to give you my opinion, because that's sort of the ironic thing about writing a book, teaching people how to be self-reliant, is kind of the self part's really on you. Yeah. So no book's going to teach you that. It's going to maybe offer some ideas for you to consider. But I know for me, another thing that has been really important is to not get locked into, this is exactly how everything's supposed to go, or this is my path, for the rest of my life, or because I first off, we know things are going to change, but I think secondly, you see a lot of people who kind of wither and die because they're not constantly looking for new ways to stretch and to grow and to push themselves. And so, that's one thing that I have done repeatedly. Almost everything that I can somehow say I'm good at now today, I was terrible at, but I knew it was an important element. Writing a book, I was not really a particularly good student, and didn't. I mean, I loved reading, but I hadn't done any writing. I decided that was going to be a good way to grow my business, and I started writing. And boy, is some of my early stuff awful, But I knew it was going to lead to something, and so I just did it. I've written over 4,000 blog posts now, and 6 books, which I think adds up to 500,000 words in those published books. But I didn't know how to do any of it. I wasn't trained in how to do it. Public speaking is another thing. I've done a tremendous amount of workshops and conferences, and again, first time I did it was the first time I'd done it. And I just said, hey, I think that's an important element. I'm going to go out and start talking to anybody that'll let me talk. So I just think trying to experience new things is the only way you're going to grow. And if you're not growing, you're going the other way.
You like strike me as like so flexible about things. I'm curious if you've ever encountered something where you were like, you know what, I'm going to sit this one out. Or like, so I'm only 39 and I've had moments where I'm like, I am too old for that nonsense. Like TikTok came around and I was like, I'm done. I don't have time for this nonsense. Like, if it becomes big, I'll check in on it later. I'm not trying to get there early and short sell attention or whatever Gary Vee's thing is. Like, I'm just going to let this one go by and I'm going to focus on like growing my business and doing my thing. It sounds like you're like super open to trying and adopting new things, but have you ever had a moment where maybe not because of the merit of it, but just you're like, I'm tired, I'm over it, I'm not going to do it?
I think there definitely are times when I have done that. But again, I'm going to go back to something I said earlier. I think a lot of times where people get in trouble is they're like, oh, Gary Vee's talking about TikTok, so I better check that out, make it part of my thing. I've always just looked at, who I'm trying to serve, and is that something that they're going to get value? I don't want to be seen as the TikTok person. I want to be seen as the person that delivers value to my customers.
That would be a big pivot for you, I think.
What's that?
I think that would be a big pivot for you.
Yeah. But you see the point there. I think that's where a lot of people get in trouble is they've seen people like Gary Vee, rise to stardom by, just talking their butts off about some new thing, earlier than everybody else. And that becomes kind of attractive to people, but I'm not sure who that serves, and of course, a lot of, all those people that were on Vine and, the experts on Periscope, are now scrambling for the next new thing, to try to hook their brand onto. And that sort of having to restart because you were, betting on a technology or a platform, I think has gotten a lot of businesses in trouble.
Yeah, there's almost like a universal quality to the stuff that you talk about. Like there's this underlying principle. It's like, don't go for the sizzle, go for the steak. Like just focus on like, what are the core principles, serve the audience, look for the different technologies going to help you accomplish your purpose. Like it's interesting. It's like a no frills, no bullshit kind of approach to like, this is actually how you do this stuff. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, marketing, here's the secret nobody wants to tell you. Marketing hasn't really changed. the way that people buy has changed, and the way they can buy has changed. But what we're trying to do as businesses hasn't changed.
Who is it that said I think it was Peter Drucker who said the only two functions in a business that matter are marketing and innovation.
That's right.
So fun.
That's probably that book or that quote just came out of a book called The Practice of Management. And I tell people all the time, especially if you can get past some of the archaic language, it's probably one of the best entrepreneur books out there.
Oh, right on. I'll have to add that to my list. One of my favorites of all time is The E-Myth Revisited.
Yeah. Michael wrote the foreword for Duct Tape Marketing.
Oh, right on. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of books, I absolutely love your new book. It is very different from your prior works for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that it is like this strange mix that doesn't quite nestle into self-help or into marketing. It's like in this, I don't even know what category you put it in Amazon, but it probably... It's
in some bizarre ones.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me a little bit. I mentioned this before we jumped on and started recording, but it reminds me a little bit of like a collection of like Seth Godin like blog posts. Like you've got the short, profound little idea, and then you've got the challenges that come with it. The calls to action. And I mentioned I have a similar book I'm thinking of writing. But what I love about it is that I get a really good feeling as I go through it. As I'm going through the different posts, it's uplifting, it's honest, and it's filled to the brim with integrity, which for me, in all the stuff I'm doing right now with the Superhero Institute, integrity and honesty and like making the world a better place is like super important. So one of the things that was really hard for me in this interview, I spent a lot of time prepping to talk to you because I was like, finally got the chance for us to connect, was that I found myself in looking through this book, like I just wanted to ask you like 20 or 30 of the challenging questions. Yeah. I'm going to ask you a few of them later on. Okay. But I just want to say what a great book you put together. I want to start with purpose. Thank you. Because you talk a lot about purpose. You've mentioned it here a little bit. And I think purpose is a really big topic that we don't discuss nearly enough in business. And I think if we did, we probably would see a lot less of the shenanigans that we see going on in business right now. All the stuff that's causing us to not trust businesses, all the stuff that's, it's just the bad press. If we had a stronger sense of purpose in the business, I think the employees would hold the business more accountable and the business would run more ethically. I want to just start by asking you, what does purpose mean to you? Like, what is it? Define it. What does it mean to you?
Well, it is a hot topic. I mean, it's one of those things that, you probably find a retreat or a course or something on, how do you find your purpose? To me, it's always been, and it remains for a lot of people, very elusive, because I don't think it's something you find. I think it's something that finds you. And that's why I really talk about this idea of go out and experience a lot of things. I mean, I have people coming all the time. They're like, I want to work in this niche, because there's an opportunity there. And I'm like, do you even know if you're going to like working with dentists or accountants or whatever it is they're saying? I mean, go out and try it, before you sell all the other domain names that you have and experience life, because that's how you're going to figure out what you like to do and what you like to enjoy. But I think also a lot of times people try to find like the sense of purpose that sounds good. And I don't care how good something sounds. I think our purpose is going to be lived out through our core values, who we're being, what line we won't cross, what we're proud of doing. And if we use that filter, for me, it's love and hope and curiosity and adventure. Those are things that if I'm bringing those to every meeting, if I'm bringing those to every email I write, if I'm bringing those, into kind of every decision I make in my business, I can't help but live my purpose.
I absolutely love that. I've been writing a lot about the topic of purpose recently. And I think a lot of people, when you say purpose to them, they hear reason. Like what's your purpose for doing it? And they what's your reason for doing it? So it becomes very like day-to-day tactical about it. And I like how by introducing values into that, you make it a little bit of a larger idea. And I want to tie this to one of the posts that you have in your book. You have one of the posts is called Immortal Impact, which to me sounds like it's a post really about legacy when I read it. Like what's the work that you're leaving behind? What's the impact of your life's work that you're leaving behind? So when I define purpose, when I talk about purpose, I'm usually looking at it as like, if you were to confront the fact that one day you're not going to be here,
Yeah.
Your life's work is being left behind. The answer to the question, what is your purpose, is what you left behind, right? Like, what is the thing that you would go forth and do? So now I'm going to ask you your challenge question, a challenge question back to you, which is, what would you give up to leave behind your most extraordinary legacy?
Is that in the book?
No, it's a tweak of one of yours, because
All right.
I know that you probably have a lot of things that you want to go forth and do with the rest of your career. You've already had the 6 books. You've done all the different things you've done.
Yeah.
There's things you want to do and a legacy that you want to leave behind. So what's that legacy, and what would you give up to get that done?
So I've already experienced this exercise. One of the things that, when you start to experience some level of, even in this small, online world, author world, you start to experience some level of what people would call fame. You really start thinking that everybody thinks you're really smart and that you have all the answers and that you have to have all the answers. That's when it actually gets even worse. So to me, giving up the need to be right, giving up the need to have, the answer to everybody's question, rather than empowering them to actually come up with the answer themselves, was a big turning point for me. And I wrote this book last year, but I feel like I've been journeying to write this book for 20 years. Entrepreneurism is one of the greatest self-development programs ever created. And I've definitely been, very, very deeply involved in trying to understand how to make a better me. And one of the things that I think was really holding me back was this need, to feel like I had to have the answers or I had to be right all the time. And once I released that, once I gave that up, I felt like my relationships with partners and vendors and clients and pretty much everybody I come into contact with day to day. I mean, I get 50 emails a day from people, asking me questions. That element is something I'm very conscious of making that change.
That's very poignant. I have a real desire to always be right. So maybe I'll take that one on myself.
And do you ever find that, you're actually willing to stick with it long enough to where you're actually realize this is actually making me a jerk? But in this, conversation or in this relationship, it's really a pretty potent voice.
Yeah. I probably have had plenty of times where I didn't realize I was being a jerk, but I think I'm pretty self-aware when I'm being stubborn and the need to be right. But then I was also taking it to be like, almost like, don't be a bullshitter, right? Like, don't pretend you have to know about every topic. Right. You don't have to be the oracle of all knowledge to be valuable to someone. Just know what you know, and then admit when you don't know what you don't know.
Well, and I tell you, there's a book called The Coaching Habit by Michael Pagani. I always get his middle name wrong, Stanier. And there was an element in that I thought was really amazing was, as a leader, a lot of times people will ask you questions because you've empowered them to come to you. You've actually trained them to come to you for the answers. And that it's extremely, extremely valuable to go, well, what would you do? Or what do you think? As opposed to giving the answer, because a lot of times they have the answer, but they just you've trained them to, get permission, from you. When if you turn around and go, well, what would you do? They might have a brilliant answer or a better answer even, but they've also now been given permission to think for themselves. And that, as simple as it sounds, was a huge, teaching moment for me when it comes to kind of leading people.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I like that. My wife moved into a management position over the last 3 years, and we routinely have discussions about like things that happen for her at work. And she asked my opinion because I've had a longer time managing people. And probably there's not enough times where I do that, but I do remember times where I've turned it back around on her and say, well, what do you think you should do here? And she'll come back with either the exact same answer that I would have given her, or the exact same answer I would have given her and then embellishing upon it and doing a lot more, or she would have come back with something I wouldn't have even thought of, and it actually teaches me something. So it's a really good kind of like callback to remember that you don't have to know everything. You don't always have to.
Well, he says, Michael says in the book that I love this. He says, just because people ask you a question doesn't mean they want the answer. And I think that is so true.
Yeah. That's another good point. I'm going to pick that book up. I'm going to put that in the show notes too, just in case anybody wants to pick it up too. I'll read it. All right, I want to talk a little bit about marketing because, I mentioned a little bit, I have this weird relationship to marketing right now because I just, maybe it's just because of like the lens of how I'm focused on it, but I don't feel the same excitement that I once did about it. And, you've been doing this for a long time and you've adopted a lot of different technologies over that time and you coach a lot of different types of businesses. So like you have staying power in it, and I'm interested about that. First, I want to know, is there a particular aspect of marketing? And I know that one of the answers to this would probably be like start with strategy and building systems and strategy. Is it an aspect of marketing that you feel is kind of like your core thing? Like mine was social media. I know you co-wrote a book on SEO. Like, is there a particular thing you think is like your kind of top of your pyramid?
Well, I feel like I'm really good at messaging and strategy for sure. And that could just be, there's a creative element to that. I'm not the most creative person, but I certainly lean that way. And then, combine that with seeing lots and lots of, non-creativity in small business owners when it comes to strategy. I feel like that's a part that is a secret sauce to duct tape marketing a little bit, and to my work. But I also think that, you mentioned the superheroes, my superpower, it has always, I feel like, been curiosity. I love to look at the new thing. I love to, move forward. I love to teach people, how to do things. And, that's probably an element that has, that's added to some staying power is that, we've freely, I've told everybody everything I know how to do, in some format or another. And, that sort of openness and willingness to share and teaching aspect, has I think served us really well.
Got it. In terms of like being able to be flexible, adapt, and try new things and everything, you've seen kind of things come and go. Are there any things that you look out into the future and you say, because of what I've seen over the time I've been in marketing, that there's a particular, because I do a lot of guest lectures and talk with a lot of people that are just coming out of college, or coming out of grad school, and they're like, I want to get into digital marketing. What should I do? And often I'll tell them that I think that the two places they should go are strategy and data analysis, right? Those are there's money. And then anytime you're kind of like in the day-to-day grind of just like you send out the emails, whatever, you're basically just like a hired hand. And it's not until you get to data analysis and strategy that you have any real potential. I'm curious your take on that. Like, where would you advise somebody that wants to get into marketing nowadays to kind of start out their career, or a vertical within the world of marketing that you think is a strong starting place?
I think your strategy is great. You're not going to hire a 22-year-old to do your strategy. So you've got that kind of going against you right now. But you will hire a 22-year-old to do paid search. I would say if I were going to advise somebody to really focus, if they wanted to start a business that they could, first off, make a lot of money, but secondly, also, if there's a creative aspect to it, there's an analysis, a data analysis aspect to it, there is a communication aspect to it. The companies that do well in that space, not only can handle the technical part, they can actually communicate with their clients, and they actually do communicate with their clients as far as what they're doing, why it's working, why it's not working. So that to me, if you were just looking at like the growth area, that to me is not going away. It's only going to get bigger. The social platforms, are banking, on search. Google's entire ecosystem is built around paid ads, even though people think it's a search engine. So I think that area, if I were getting into marketing, would be the area that I would spend a whole lot of time on. It's also an area where, you get a couple certifications, you do a couple campaigns, and you're so far, so much farther ahead already than, a lot of people. I'm really not, there are a whole lot of people selling the $5,000 Facebook advertising course. And I'm really not talking about that. I'm talking about, working with, organizations that invest significantly in paid search for, the survival of their business on a global scale. And that's, that to me is an area that's still pretty wide open.
All right. So I don't want to say challenge you on it, but let me ask you this somewhat challenging question.
Mm-hmm.
Technology is progressing rapidly, and it has been for the last 10 years, and I feel like it's getting faster. I could be wrong. But with AI and machine learning, things like paid advertising, how susceptible do you think that is to actually being just completely overtaken and run by AI platforms, kind of pushing that job? So, I mean, like, it just in terms of like advising someone to think about going into that, and you could say, yeah, sure, we need people to run those machines, but at some point, will we? And, you know, I guess just is it possible that that job will just completely go away because of AI and machine learning? Do you have any concerns about what that's going to do to marketing in general?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. You know, Google would tell you that they could do that now, you know, with their campaigns. But you want Google running your campaigns, do you?
I don't know.
Guess what they're going to do?
Yeah.
They're going to find this the fastest way to suck as much money out of you as possible and call it AI.
I guess
is my view.
Yeah.
And I think that while they've gotten incredibly better, you know, over the last 15 years, I still think that the element of human intent in search campaigns, paid search campaigns, is going to be something that's going to remain a creative art. There's no question machines can do things faster. They can do things to a certain degree, I think, today, as well as, you know, any human being. But I think we're still talking about, you know, human beings, you know, doing the search, doing the purchase, you know, responding to the message in a way that, you know, I think we're still a long way away from, you know, that job going away.
All right. I'll buy it. I'm less optimistic about it. You strike me as very optimistic about all this stuff, and maybe I've just become very pessimistic about all this stuff. But, you know, I'm curious what you think about things like, so for instance, like algorithms in social media are driven by outrage to a certain extent. That outrage will sell, engagement sells, right? That's the stuff that gets more eyeballs, more clicks, it spreads. And at the same time, you could probably build out some ads that will get more clicks by creating controversy or by using psychological tricks, this and that. And you strike me as someone who really approaches things like very honestly. I mean, throughout your entire book, there's a lot of things about questioning your intention. Why are you doing? What are you doing? What's the purpose behind it? All these sort of questions. How do you kind of parse together your seemingly optimistic worldview about all this stuff with the fact that there's all of this other more nefarious stuff taking place, like dark patterns in design and UX, get people to take actions? I mean, will good ultimately prevail over evil in your perspective? Because I guess I'm just looking at it as like, oh God, all of the nasty stuff seems to be just increasing, and it's everywhere.
I choose to focus on what I can control, which is how I show up and how I respond. Those are the only two things I can control. And I think it's really easy to spend a lot of energy on stuff like you just described, but I'm not sure how, you know, spending or expending that energy on that's going to bring any joy into my life.
I completely agree with you. And the reason I'm asking the questions is because this is actually what was going through my head as I was reading through the pages of the Self-Reliant Entrepreneur. I'm reading it and I was like, yes, I believe that. I flip another page. I'm like, hell yeah, that. But then I have all of this creeping crap coming into my head of everything that I see when I go online. I see all of this nastiness, all these different things. So I wanted to talk to you about how you parse together those things. And I think your perspective is, unsurprisingly, like a very straightforward and simple way of looking at it. So I want to talk to you a little bit about congruence. I heard you talk a little bit on, I heard you on Grant Baldwin's podcast. You talked a little bit about it. And I was like, want to talk more about that. So you have this post in the book on congruence, this idea that like essentially you're trying to create alignment between kind of who you want to be and who you are, the decisions that you want to make versus decisions that you do make, this kind of idea of bringing those things together. And you strike me as someone who has learned how to do that very well. I guess to start out with, for those who maybe have never heard the word congruence or just don't know anything that I just said, can you define a little bit what you mean when you say congruence?
Well, that your thoughts and words and actions are in alignment. You know, you do what you say. You are who you are. People aren't getting, you know, something fake from you. You know, in one setting and something else in another. I mean, it's a really simple way to live, because you don't have to remember your lies.
Yeah.
So,
so you want to work with a certain type of client, right? Like, so you mentioned you want to work with clients that love what you do and you love what they do, right? And I guess this is kind of one of the things when I was reading through it, like so many of the things that you say in the book and that the ideas that you're putting out there and just the way you come across, I'm so on board with. But when I think about some of those days that you have as an entrepreneur, payroll's coming up, or you got to pay yourself and it's just not there, or there's a bill, or there's a client that just decided to walk away even though you did all the work that you said you were going to do, just all of this stuff that happens, right? And you want to be that high ideal entrepreneur that you want to not compromise on your values, but the world, your rent, your mortgage, your healthcare bills, whatever it is, almost necessitates that you chase that dollar. How can entrepreneurs and employees remind themselves and stay true to the pursuit of congruence to be who they want to be in the world when it seems like all the systems out there at times are aligning to keep you from doing the thing that you want to do? You know what I'm saying?
And I don't want to give your listeners the impression that I don't ever stress out about anything. But again, I come back to experience has taught me that stressing out over a lot of things is not going to change anything. And so, all it's going to do is wear me down and have me make maybe even poorer decisions. I read a Seth Godin, you mentioned Seth on some of these, as his little short podcasts, or I'm sorry, his little short blog posts. And I read something that I think is such a simple way to explain this, is that, the way to manage kind of your congruence is that, to ask yourself, is this work I'm proud of? I mean, that to me is the simplest. Is this an email I'm proud of? Is this a blog post I'm proud of? Is this a sales call I'm proud of? And I think that's it doesn't mean that things are going to go your way magically and you're going to know how to pay the bills, but you certainly will probably stay in alignment.
And I'm sure there's also going to be, even if you do have that, there's going to be times where you're like, no, I'm not super proud of it, but I have to get it out. Like there's sort of like the reality of it.
Yeah. I find myself, sometimes because it is so, a lot of times you got 10 things to do. One of my greatest examples, I think, were, there are times when I'll phone it in and send out an email and, it gets, zero response, no surprise there. And then when I write something that people know is me and they know that I'm being real and that, it's my voice, I will immediately get 10, emails back saying, that was really awesome. Or, I really like how you said that. And it's just, I think people that I like to use email as an example because it's so easy to automate it and to phone it in and to, put no effort into it at all. But to me, it's one of the greatest feedback loops of like, okay, I achieved what for me is my best work, because people are telling me so.
I love it. I've found in my entrepreneurial life that the only thing that got me through, especially in the early days, was knowing that there are other lunatics out there like me. So like, like connecting with another entrepreneur and talking is always just like one of my favorite things. So I'm loving hearing like your more years of experience going through this and like how you've kind of kept your head on straight through. It's like, it's very inspiring and I'm loving it. Who are some of the people that are like that for you? Like who's inspired you? Who are some people you admire and look up to? Sure. Who do you turn to when you're not this version of you, when you're like the other version where you're like, everything is crumbling? Like, how do you keep yourself grounded? Who are those people? Who are the ones that inspire you?
Sure. Well, so we haven't talked specifically about some of the format of the book. One of the things that I did in this book was I sourced a great deal of mid-19th century literature. So Emerson, Thoreau, Hawthorne, Louisa May Alcott. And for me, it based a lot on what was going on in America at the time. A lot of that writing was some of the first sort of counterculture, we need to think for ourselves. To me, still some of the greatest entrepreneurial, writing that ever existed. The point I'm trying to make is that, one of the things I discovered in doing that, researching that body of work is they were all friends. they wrote letters to each other. You think of these famous authors, now, and we just think of them as, oh yeah, he wrote Moby Dick, and, he wrote The Scarlet Letter, and, she wrote Little Women, but they were all really good friends. And that's something that, it shouldn't have surprised me, but it kind of did. But, I got into their letters and their journals and things, and saw those connections. And I think that, that still exists today. I mean, because of the virtual world we live in, the fact that, a lot of authors and speakers, end up at a lot of the same events, a lot of the people that are, I would call contemporaries, in doing some of the same thing that I'm doing, have been people that I've really leaned on. I've, even if it's from a distance, I have, felt, mentored by, them, and felt, supported by them. You mentioned a couple names. Peter Drucker is one that I've been a big fan of. Michael Gerber was really, in a lot of ways, his E-Myth book was really the genesis of my thinking about marketing as a system. So he had a giant impact on me. Seth Godin has been a true friend, and generous enough to write a blurb for, I think, at least 4 of my books now over the years. And so, that kind of community, and the way we're able to be a little bit connected by doing stuff like this, but then, still kind of have that human to human connection when we get together at events, has really been a great community to be in.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm a huge fan of everybody that you've just mentioned. And a buddy of mine that he was my first employee at my agency, we have this conversation called Who Got to You First? And it's this idea that, like, your early inspirations are often kind of what shapes how you think about the craft that you're going into. Kind of to your point, like Michael Gerber shaping a lot of how you think of marketing as a system. Seth Godin and Mitch Joel are 2 people who, for me, were like very inspirational in setting the direction for me. So let's actually talk more about the book. I know I kind of went off on a bunch of tangents, but I want to talk a little bit about the book. I think that the layout of it is really interesting. So you've got it divided into 4 different seasons, and then each month has its own topic. So right. First question, and I hope you don't mind me reading some of the seasons and the months and what their topics are, but you go through planning, discovering, evolving, and growing. Yep. That makes perfect sense to me as a flow. Are all of the months ordered in a very particular way as well within those, or are they 2 separate systems? Are they overlapping systems? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, no, to me at least, they were very nested together. So the seasons, I mean, it's an annual book, right? It's a calendar book, January through December. So the metaphor of seasons, I think, is there obviously for the taking. But then each month, trust and freedom and commitment and congruence, as we talked about, resilience and failure, grace. Each month, the subset of 3 months, I suppose, to me, fit in the season. For example, trust is the January theme. And I think one of the things that the first hurdle that an entrepreneur has to get over is trusting themselves. Enough to is this idea stupid? I don't care that people are telling me I shouldn't do this. That's kind of the first hurdle. And so, each of the months, the themes for the months did fit, at least for me, into the kind of stage or season that they fit in. I will tell you, just from an organizational standpoint, I used the seasons to give the book a bit of a narrative arc, but when I started doing the research, every page has a reading from this mid-19th century literature across dozens and dozens of authors. And I just started digging in and reading everything I could about the Transcendentalists and about that time period and then certain authors. And I realized, wait a minute, I have no way to organize this. How am I just going to find 400 readings and, throw them in a box and then, pick them out? So when I came up with the theme structure, it actually turned it into a spreadsheet project, because then I could collect readings around, these predetermined themes. I could actually go looking for, what did Thoreau have to say about love, for example, and it really made kind of the research component much more manageable.
Yeah, I would say just the first thing that struck me about the book, as much as anything else, is like, what a beast of a task to organize it. Yeah, but so many things I want to ask you about it. So, you've got July as the month is failure.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you if there was a reason, like, was July always like your roughest month or something? That just makes sense.
No. The thing about these seasons is it's not like we don't go through these one time in our life, what I found is that these seasons have repeated. I've changed my model. I've changed my direction. I mean, Lord knows, marketing tactics and platforms have changed that we've had to kind of get used to. So I feel like this is a never ending, kind of flow of these seasons. But what I find is that failure shows up right in the middle. A lot of times people think failure shows up in the beginning, but we're jazzed about what we're doing. We're discovering if it's going to work. We're finding our purpose, and it's actually once people start feeling like they're getting a little momentum is a lot of times where like, okay, now you're trying to do this at scale. That's not going to work the way you want it to work, and so that to me is a lot of times where that shows up, failure is a big word. It doesn't ultimately mean you crashed and burned, but it may mean that you need to rethink what you're doing. You need to discover other opportunities, and really the most, I think resilience is in that season as well. And I think the most successful entrepreneurs actually are able to reframe failure in such a way that it's a teaching lesson. It's not the world is bad. It's not this idea is bad. It's like this approach, people didn't see what I saw. So what can I learn from that? And that, level of resilience is ultimately you either crash and burn, in that kind of stage, or you are resilient enough to figure out a new way to go. And that's, that's when you pass into that last stage, which to me is where you then start thinking about, what difference do I want to make in the world?
I love it. And one of the questions I was also going to ask you and I anticipated that you were going to say that about July and failure, that it was because I really do. These are all timeless. I mean, like you can go January to December, and each one of these in every single month, within each month, you're probably going through all 12, right? So I guess the question would be if let's say I started a business on April 7th, should I start at April 7th or should I start at January 1st? Because if there's,
you should start
at,
I was going to say, you should start at April 7th. I think because next April 7th, you're going to be a different person. And you can just start all over again. I don't think there's like you could start, you and I are recording this in December. You could start December 6th. It's not like you're going to ruin the ending. It's because the way I view this book is this isn't a book you take on vacation and knock out. This is a practice. That, and I know people will, I've already heard from people, some people read 5 or 6 a day and they jump around, they just go randomly, to a page. But I think a lot of people will kind of work into their morning routine. I think a lot of entrepreneurs have kind of gotten in that rhythm of, I'm going to get up, I'm going to read, I'm going to meditate, I'm going to exercise, I'm going to get myself ready so I can go out there and take on the day. So I wrote this book because that's a practice that I've done for years. And this format felt like it fit into that for me.
Do you have an audiobook of it yet? Because I can totally see this as being like a morning, like audio sort of routine.
Yeah. So I'm not really sure why this happened, but my publisher held the audiobook for a couple months. I'm not really sure. I've recorded it. It's out there and it'll be available, but it's going to be like February 1st. I'm kind of bummed about that because I'm with you. I mean, I think, and it's not just me. I mean, you look at the best-selling books right now, the audiobook's right up there, with the print book. And in some cases, I think I read something in the UK recently that audiobooks have outstripped, the digital Kindle books in sales for the first time really since digital books came online. So wow. I think that's just a format people want to consume content in.
Yeah, I've gotten much more into audiobooks recently. And I also find there's a certain connection you get with the author when the author reads the book that allows you to kind of
that's right.
get their style and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to tell you though, if I can complain it's hard to read an audiobook. This book took me 22 hours.
Wow.
Of studio time.
Yeah.
So it's on
the bright side, you have enough.
It's tough.
So, so that's really cool. Nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't we read one? We've been talking about the format. Let's give your listeners an actual dose of it.
Yeah, let's do my birthday, May 2nd.
May 2nd. Okay, so every day starts with a title for that date, and then a reading from some of the literature that I chose to source, and then 100 words for me, 150 words for me, and then a challenge question. So I have no idea. I haven't pre-looked at this. Hopefully it'll be appropriate for you, Jeff.
God, I hope so.
May 2nd, owned impact. It is simpler to be self-dependent. The height, the deity of a person is to be self-sustained, to need no gift, no foreign force. Society is good when it does not violate me, but best when it is likest to solitude. That's from Ralph Waldo Emerson's essay, Self-Reliance, which was written in 1841. Many people start businesses because they want to impact something. They want to right some wrong. Still more, however, start businesses because they don't have another option. They know how to do something. They figure it's a decent way to make a living, and they come to embrace the notion of impact. The most potent outcome of being an entrepreneur is the impact that it provides you. In fact, the only way to change the world is to be that change in yourself first. You can't give something to someone you can't give something you don't possess. Become self-dependent. When you need nothing, owe nothing, become internally self-sustained, you can fully embrace the mark you plan to leave on others. Today, sit quietly and alone and think for a moment about the impact that you're having, the impact you want to have, the impact that you need to have. If you can start internally to be that impact, it will radiate externally. And your question today, when is the last time something really had an impact on your life? Did anything change because of it?
I'll humbly submit that is very relevant to me. Yeah. One of the things that I really enjoyed about the book, and I think why it functions really nicely as in so many different categories, is that I found as I was going through it, some of the passages that you pulled out from, these famous authors, I was like, I get it. Yeah. Like I get it immediately. And then there were others where I was like, I'm going to have to think on this. Like I'm going to have to really spend some time mulling over what they mean. Because it was also, some of these things were written, in the 1800s. And
yeah. So the language is a little flowery.
Yeah. Or it's poetry to a certain extent. Like you have to kind of parse through it. So it's nice because it is a meditative process. Mm-hmm. And because these are short enough that you can read through it several times and you still have plenty of time to get to work.
Yeah. And actually, one of the things I wanted to do is I didn't want to just come up with the Pinterest boards and the Instagram quotes. I really went deep. And so there's some very little known authors. A lot of the female authors of the time, weren't given the light of day. So I unearthed a lot of that'll be new to people. But I dug into, journals and letters and things that maybe, didn't, they've been collected, but they're more academic works in some cases. And so I feel like there are times when I definitely give people the opportunity to go deeper into some of these, authors that they may be familiar with.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's an absolutely fantastic book. I don't know if you've thought about this, but like, as I'm writing my book, I try to think a lot about like, what do I want to happen? What do I want to happen next from it? And I'd imagine when you wrote your first 5 books, that it was kind of straightforward, more straightforward than with this, where it was like, I want people to read this, get value from it, and grow their business with better marketing. It was very direct.
Yeah.
What's your hope with this? Like, why'd you even write it? Like, where did that come from? I know part of it was that like, I remember you saying that you were looking for some inspiration yourself. So it was kind of a project for you, but like, what's the impact you want this to have for people?
Well, one of the reasons it was important for me to write this now, and, not everybody's going to agree with this point of view, but I feel like we certainly as a nation in the United States, are really divided, really fractured. You talked about some of the shadowy stuff and the polarization and social media. I think entrepreneurs have always been a force of good. And I think that a lot of the literature that was written that I sourced in this book was in a time when America was in a similar turmoil. I mean, we were on the cusp of the Civil War. Women were marching in the streets to get the right to vote. We were trying to abolish slavery. I mean, there was a lot of hey, we need to like take back, who we are as a people. So if you want to ask me, the ultimate goal is that an army of self-reliant entrepreneurs will help us, heal in some way and get back to a place where we're not so divided.
Holy shit. That's awesome. All right.
Not too big, is it?
I love it. I mean, look, I can't think of a better way to follow that up. I think that right there, that's it. That's where I'm going to make that the point to end on. I think everyone should go out and pick up a copy of your book for sure, The Self-Reliant Entrepreneur. And I really think that they should also follow you and check out all the rest of the stuff you've done. You've been putting in the work for a long time. You're an inspiration. I'm really glad we got the chance to finally connect. Now's the point in the show. I want you to just take whatever time you want to just talk about whatever you want to talk about. What do you want to promote? What do you want to tell people about? Where can people find you? Where they can go be social with you? Like all that sort of good stuff.
All right, cool. So the book itself can be purchased anywhere you purchase books. I always like to put in a plug for that local corner bookstore. Hopefully you have one of those in your town still, but you can get it from any of the online retailers as well. And there's a digital version. There will be, depending upon when you listen to this, an audio version as well. If you want to hear more interviews like this and just check out more about the book itself, it's just self-reliantentrepreneur.com. And if you want to get a little peek into what I've been up to the last 30 years, it's just Duct Tape Marketing.com. It's DUCTTAPE marketing.com. And I'm Duct Tape Marketing on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram. And funny, I've been on Twitter so long that when Twitter first came out, you couldn't have your username or your handle as long as Duct Tape Marketing. So it's just Duct Tape on Twitter.
Oh my God, that's funny. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show, man. This was a blast for me. I posted on Twitter before we even got on here that as I was like looking into you and reading the book and thinking about all the questions I want to talk to you about and your experience as an entrepreneur, I felt like we could probably talk for like 8 hours, but I don't want to give it all away in the first interview. So hopefully we'll have a chance to talk again in the future. If you write another book, I'd love to have you back on, and I strongly encourage everyone to look at that. And everything you talked about, I will put in the show notes. So it's very easy for people to get to it. If you're on Overcast, just swipe to the right. If you're on iTunes, do whatever you do on iTunes. So yeah, man, thanks for coming on. I guess I would say that this podcast was a lot of different things, but I guess if I had to say it was one word, I'd say it was shareable. Wait, don't leave. If you've never listened to my fancy outro, do it just once for me, please. Okay, if you enjoy Shareable and you find it valuable, there's a few ways that you can support the show. One, you can share it on social media, which I strongly encourage. I mean, it's literally the name of the show, Shareable. 2, you can review it on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're an Overcast user, as many of my listeners are, make sure to click that star button on the episodes that you like. The third way that you could support the show is by blogging about it or discussing it on your own podcast, or even by making a YouTube video where you talk about one of the episodes. And then the final way that you can support the show is by supporting it directly on Patreon. You can find the link in the show notes. Now, before I let you go, I want to tell you about one other thing, Shareable.fm, where this podcast is hosted. Do you have a podcast or know someone that has a podcast that you think is particularly, shareable? Well, send them to Shareable.fm to apply to be on the network. Shows that are selected not only get added to the site, and in some cases to the Shareable FM radio podcasts, but we also bring together the best tips, tricks, and tactics for promoting your show and growing listenership. And for our headliner and feature shows, we provide fully outsourced social advertising support. So leave the promotion to us, okay? So give it a look, and if you want to find some new and interesting shows, or if you just want additional exposure for your own show or know someone who would benefit, please let them know about it. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Shareable. I sincerely appreciate it, and this show would mean absolutely nothing without you, the listener. So thank you, and I hope to see you back for the next one. Goodbye for now.